and welcome to Talking Cars. I'm Jennifer Stockberger.
I'm John Lidcove.
And I'm Alex Nizick.
So we're going to start today with our final test results of the somewhat quirky Hyundai Santa Cruz pickup truck. So I have to tell you, we took this truck to a college visit for my young son, and people were literally clamoring around it because it is kind of, I use quirky, but I use it in a positive way. Very different looking, very new. I have a little sentimental because I had a boyfriend who had a Subaru Brat back in the day. But nice. Just kind of that next one in the small pickup segment. So I think there's really on this truck two questions. How does it perform as a vehicle? And then ultimately, how does it perform as a little truck? So I'm going to start with you, Alex, on the first question. How is it as a vehicle?
It's pretty nice. I walked away pretty happy with how it drove, how comfortable it was. It didn't quite dethrone the Honda Ridgeline as our top small truck. And keep in mind, this is quite a bit smaller than the Ridgeline. I think it's almost 2 feet shorter than the Ridgeline in terms of length. But it did well. I really like the way it drives, and I'll start there. The powertrain is strong. The handling is quite good. I enjoyed piloting this thing around, and it's comfortable. Doesn't really have that truckish ride that you might think of when you think of like a small pickup truck. Not so much the Ridgeline, but something like a Tacoma or a Ford Ranger, for example, right? So those trucks, when they're unloaded in the bed, they're bouncing around in the back. The ride's pretty rough. They're a little difficult to drive, and you just don't have any of that here. So this is based on it's a really interesting vehicle. It's kind of a mashup of different Hyundai products. So the front doors, the hood, and the front fascia are pretty much all Tucson. And so is the dashboard and the controls. And that's a good thing, actually, that vehicle did well there in terms of controls and interior comfort. So everything from the B-pillar back is unique to the Santa Cruz. It's a bit smaller than the Tucson, so the Santa Cruz is suffering a little bit in that regard. It's a little less comfortable back there. Visibility is tight. And then, of course, the truck bed is completely unique to the Santa Cruz. And then it borrows some other components from the larger Santa Fe. So the rear suspension is more robust than the Tucson. It's borrowed from the Santa Fe. So it's heavier duty, gets you some of that towing and load capacity. And then it also borrows the powertrain, that 2.5 turbocharged engine, which you can't get in the Tucson. It's actually quite a bit of power for a vehicle this size, and it gets it going pretty good. The dual clutch transmission has some oddities, but once you get up and going, it's pretty nice.
Yeah, and I think it's worth noting that the base engine is 191 horsepower, 2.5 liter Ford, no turbo. So may not be as pleasing as the turbo we had in all regards.
Right. And it wasn't in the Tucson. We tested that base engine in the Tucson. In that smaller vehicle, we found it kind of a little lazy and underpowered. So I would suspect that you're definitely right about that.
Right. So, and the obvious other question is, as a vehicle, pretty good. And the mashup really does have some advantages. John, I know you had occasion to use it somewhat as a truck. How does it perform as a pickup truck?
Yeah, it's funny. I'll consider it a trucklet.
I like it.
You said Brat, Subaru Brat. I'll say Subaru Baja. The same thing. A lot of people I cycle with were really interested in it because of the trunk. So it has a trunk inside of the pickup bed, a sealed trunk, sort of like the Honda Ridgeline does. Yeah. It has a hard tonneau cover that you could get that accordions, so it folds back, so it's not just like something where you snap, but you actually pull it. It's hard. It can latch in a couple different spots. But it's a really short bed. So you can't fit a bicycle in there and pull the tonneau at all.
Right.
And you may not even be able to fit a bicycle in there with the wheel turn and put the gate up. So I think you really need a 2-inch hitch on the back so you can have an external bike rack. But if you do that, or you could go the way that people are going now with pickup trucks, where you get a pad over the tailgate, you hang the bike with the wheel over there. I'm not a big fan of doing that with my bikes, but your mileage may vary. You get a hitch though. It really does serve a lot of purpose for people who are particularly going in the woods. Have a mountain bike or something like that, or going hiking or whatever, where you can throw all your dirty stuff now in this bed that is sealable. You're not worried about it flying out or something like that, or being exposed if you go and get something to eat afterwards, and you're not putting dirty stuff inside the vehicle itself. So you could carry 4 people and bikes and their junk. Let's just use that word. And it it's a lot nicer because it's not exposed to the elements or to someone passing by who wants to grab it. So in that way it's great. And I was able to put my road bike in the back because, like a lot of pickup trucks, you could flip the seats up. The seat base is up and they stay up, which is very nice. Not all new trucklet car-based trucks do that. And I could fit it in there, so it was easy, and I didn't have to worry about having it bounce around the bed. So in that respect, it is a nice, useful truck.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that the larger powertrain also gives it 5,000 pounds of towing capacity. So not something we typically see in a vehicle of that size, but again, that mashup that Alex is talking about gives it that advantage of towing. I agree with you, and I think I've told you guys I've changed my, if I were retiring today, car from the Kia Sorento to the Honda Ridgeline for my gentlewoman farmer lifestyle. This was, for that type of lifestyle, I think it's very good. But for me, it was still a little small, both in the cabin space, as Alex alluded to, that rear seat. Again, I got big kids now, little kids, and that bed. Certainly for a gardener or somebody like that, has all the advantages of a small SUV like the Tucson. Access, all of that. Simple controls that Hyundai's done a great job with. Good fuel economy over some of the slightly larger trucks. So it's a balance. It's certainly a vehicle. If you're thinking gardening and small dirty things, John, or hiking and that type of thing, fishermen, I think of, rods and reels and fish, it would be a great vehicle. I truly agree.
It's super quiet. I mean,
yes.
The unibody, the car-based vehicle keeps it super, super quiet.
Yeah.
Which is, and then with this, you're not revving this kind of underpowered engine either to get, keep 70, 80 miles an hour with traffic on the highway, so you don't have that droning noise either.
I was going to say, it's pretty easy to forget that you're actually driving what you might think of as a pickup truck while you're sitting behind the wheel. It feels like driving a Tucson for the most part. I mean, it's a little longer, so it maybe doesn't turn in so quickly or something like that, but who cares? It's comfortable. It rides well. You can almost forget that you're pulling that bed behind you.
And like you said, Jen, my kids are 12 and 10 almost. They fit in the back seat well, but much like the Ridgeline, Honda Ridgeline based on the Pilot has a slightly smaller back seat. Mm-hmm. This one drops down another class as well. Mm-hmm. So at least the Ridgeline has an adult back seat.
Right.
This one is definitely a penalty box for adults. For my
17-year-old boy challenge, it's definitely a penalty box. And I do want to add on this trucklet, which I love that word, John. Forward collision warning, automatic emergency braking with pedestrian and cyclist detection, John. Lane departure warning, lane keeping assist, all standard. Blind spot warning, as we often see, optional. Rear cross traffic warning, optional, because it is not on the base SE, not even offered on the base SE. So lots of safety. I do think, and its overall score may not quite convey because it's being compared against some of those slightly larger pickup trucks. Again, better interiors. But if it sounds like it might be right for your lifestyle, or that you're only using the bed occasionally for, a run to the dump or some gardening, or it's definitely worth a look at. And it's very interesting truck.
Yeah. I would like to add one anecdote. I took this truck to my parents' house a couple hours away for a weekend. And if you're thinking about this coming from an SUV where you can put all of your luggage and like soft bags and things like that in the trunk and then still have people inside for the seats, sitting in these seats, you might not be able to do that here because it was a snowy, rainy weekend. So we couldn't put anything in the bed because it's going to get soaking wet. So now that's all in the back seat. And I know this sounds kind of obvious, but until it happens, you might not think about it.
Right.
Now all of our luggage is in the passenger compartment. And if we had more than just my wife and I, no other passengers. So there's some of that flexibility that you might have with an SUV that you kind of lose here. It does have that tonneau cover, but you can't really rely on it to be completely waterproof.
Right. Yeah, not weather tight. Definitely. It's great for dirty stuff.
Totally.
And it's it's not an easy vehicle to justify if it's just dump runs. I mean, a Beetle pickup truck is best for dump runs only. But as a useful vehicle, as a less jouncy for a technical term pickup, as I know people will be going, it's not a truck, it's not a truck, it's not a truck, and it's not, but it also doesn't have all the drawbacks of the truck either.
Right.
So certainly we have all of the final test results of the Hyundai Santa Cruz at consumerreports.org if you want to dig into those details, depending on how you might want to use it. Certainly a fun styled truck. We're not rating style, but definitely draws some reaction. Moving on to our question of the week. As always, your 30-second video clips, your questions, keep them coming. talkingcars@icloud.com. Love the interaction. And this one comes from Alex, another Alex from Canada. Take a listen.
I saw some reliability scores in the latest Consumer Reports magazine that I thought were strange. For example, the Chevy Trailblazer with a score of 100 and the Toyota RAV4 with a score of 44. I thought that was strange considering Toyotas are generally known to be long-lasting cars and Chevys maybe to break down early. So I'm wondering, does your reliability score take into account only the reliability in the first 12 months, or does it look into the long-term reliability? Which car is more likely to do better in the long term and give long-term reliability? Which one's more likely to last after 200,000 kilometers in 10 years? The Chevy with the good reliability score or the Toyota with the bad reliability score? Thanks.
So Alex has actually a lot of questions within his question. So I think the first one is about our reliability ratings in general. And Alex, maybe you can help Alex on that question.
Alex, I'm happy to help. So it's a complicated topic, reliability. I mean, there are so many things that can affect the reliability of a car. But as far as our ratings, you asked about whether it takes into 12 months or, the life of the vehicle. And we do reliability ratings on a yearly basis. When we're calculating predicted reliability of future models or, upcoming year for an existing model, it takes into 3 years of data, if it can, takes into account 3 years of data. Of course, that's not always available. So we might have to do our best to make the prediction, but so it is on a yearly basis. And I know John's going to maybe go into more detail on the specific model, but just, the models that you threw out there, the Trailblazer and the RAV4, one thing can really go wrong with a model, and there could be so many reasons that happens, whether it's a supplier change or just an inherent defect in the way a part was designed from the get-go that doesn't get resolved. In the case of the RAV4, it's a fuel pump and fuel tank issue. And basically every RAV4 has a fuel pump and a fuel tank, so it proliferates throughout the whole lineup and it can really degrade, and it's a critical function, right? So it degrades the reliability of the model as a whole.
And so to Alex's point, in a traditionally very reliable model, it just so happens. So it just goes to show you a very super reliable brand or model can have an off year or a component problem.
And every other thing in that car could be perfect, perfect as far as reliability goes. But if you can't drive it because the fuel pump's failed and it's constantly going to the shop for that one issue, there you go.
Yeah. And John, in his question, going back to what you were saying, that very direct comparison, the Trailblazer versus the RAV4. And you had some thoughts about why the Trailblazer in this case may be so good.
Yeah. So a number of Alex touched on it where we try to look at 3 years. And one of the things that we do is, particularly if 3 years of data are not available, we look at other vehicles from the manufacturer that use the same components or use the same platform. So shared components, particularly looking drivetrain and such. But the Trailblazer, introduced for 21, is based on basically it's a Buick Encore GX. It's there's different trim, there's different look and feel, but the guts of it is a Buick Encore GX, which was introduced for the 20 model year. And like Alex said, also our reliability survey is yearly. So we don't say, oh, well, everyone in the 21 survey said this about the Trailblazer, there's the score. No, we go out and say, okay, now it's 2021 for the for the end of year survey. Tell us about your experience with your 2020 Encore GX, which you told us about in 2020 as well in that survey. So the first model year, and one additional point is, first model years of vehicles, no matter the manufacturer, tend to have a lower reliability score rating than the final model year of the previous generation. The final model year, they got everything worked out. It may be old and long in the tooth as far as some technology and features, but it's by that point, if they didn't get it right, that's a star-crossed model. So what you see in relation with the Encore GX, it debuted as a 20. It still has average reliability because there are still parts, the brakes and noises and leaks and in-car electronics for the specific categories that have they aren't above average or well above average. They're either average or below average scores that people are telling us about. So that model still in its second year out there is still having problems. The 2021 model actually is well above average, which is the same as the Trailblazer. So what we're looking at with the Trailblazer is we look at the scores that we got from people for the 2021 model, but we also look at what the Buick Encore GX has for the 2021 model, just for additional data on that. And it's just above board. It has well above average reliability, so very low problem rate percentage compared to the average model for every category, which is how it got its score. The Toyota RAV4, people from that first model year are still having problems with it today in the survey, and that is going to affect it because if people are having issues with the vehicle that Toyota has not been able to address, it does weight the score down for the current model and the prediction for that 2022.
Right. The subsequent years, if they can't work it out. I think, I always say when we talk about health, I say, it's one thing to avoid getting sick. But the other thing I say of people's general health is when you get sick, how quickly do you feel better? How quickly do you jump back? That's the same with the cars. It's not that they're never going to have a problem, but how quickly can manufacturers address them and change them so that subsequent model year is now looking better. Sounds like Buick having a little trouble there, whereas Toyota, maybe in a couple years, maybe 23 show that they're better on that RAV4. Right. But again, I just caution, research is key, not just on a traditionally stellar, reliable brand, but what's it share? What does the Trailblazer share with that Encore? Did they work out the kinks in the Encore first? And John, often that luxury, more loaded brand, like the Buick versus the Chevy, may have more things to go wrong. We've seen that as well in terms of electronics and things like that as well.
You definitely see that. We saw that a lot in our survey this year. And if you go to consumerreports.org, you'll see our report where we talked about it with EVs in particular. A lot of the upper echelon, if you want to say, the luxury-like EVs. The electric vehicle componentry isn't necessarily the problem. Right. It's all the extra ancillary stuff, that's caused issues. And so what you're talking about, a great example that kind of backs up the Chevrolet Buick issue, or what we saw with Chevrolet and Buick, is Kia and Hyundai. Right. Hyundai tends to launch a vehicle first. So the Hyundai Sonata is the first model. The Kia K5 comes out a year later, or at the time the Kia Optima, for example, the previous gen. The Hyundai launches, they have first year woes. Second year, the Kia comes out. The Hyundai's on its second model year. That one actually has had the issues addressed, and the Kia launches very well because they already took the learnings from that first year and they applied it to the production line. So avoiding first years, but if you see twin models, if you really need a new one, buy the first year of the twin, not the first year of the before the child gets a brother or sister, so to speak.
That's right. Again, new parents have first year woes too. So great question, Alex. Hopefully we unpacked what you had in there and have a better understanding, not just of reliability, but those two cars in general. So as always, we thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Keep the questions coming. TalkingCars@iCloud.com, and we will see you next week.